Welcome to Washington State Legends of Soccer and our series Conversations with a Legend. I'm Frank MacDonald. Our producer is Leanne Johnson. Today, our guest is Keelin Winters Pattillo. We know Keelin as the standout midfielder for the first 5 seasons of Reign FC. She captained the Reign to NWSL Shields in 2014 and 2015. Since retiring in 2016, she's become a Kirkland, Washington firefighter at Station 22. Keelin and her wife, Paige, have a son and a growing family. Welcome, Keelin.
Thanks for having me.
All right, good to see you.
You too.
So we traditionally start off these conversations with where'd you come from? And you're not a native to the Pacific Northwest. You grew up in the Denver suburbs. The game brought you to this area. So tell us what you were seeking in a college experience, who you considered, and how you found your way to the University of Portland.
Yeah, so I graduated high school in Denver, Colorado. And when I was going through the whole recruitment process, I went on a couple of unofficial visits. I went to, I think it came down to the University of Texas, Austin, and University of Portland. Those were my top two. And you couldn't really pick two more opposite schools. One is, 50,000 students, and the other is under 3,000. One's a huge football school, and one's a big soccer school. But for me, when I went on those two visits, it became really apparent which one I wanted to go to. I'll give you a good example. I was on my visit at University of Texas, and they were showing me around the athletic facilities, and they were showing me the big football stadium and where the football players eat and where the football players train and their gym. And I was like, okay, when are we going to get to the soccer field? But then on my visit to the University of Portland, I got to see a game where I'm pretty certain it was darn near sold out. The student body was massive at the game with the Villa Drum Squad and everybody out supporting the team. And it just became really apparent to me that I wanted to play at a school where soccer was supported and the priority. And it, after that visit, it really made my decision pretty easy.
I would imagine seeing a crowd like that for college soccer, because I doubt that in high school and club you play before much more than parents and a few friends.
No, and I mean, soccer in general throughout the United States isn't as well supported as other sports are. But for me, I think the coolest part about the University of Portland was that the women's soccer team was equally, if not more supported and more cheered on by the general public than the men's side, which for me was just a crazy experience. But it was really awesome. I had a wonderful time, and I'm definitely glad that I made that decision.
So you've got how many? Your father played college and NBA basketball, so he's been in the athletic arena. I don't know about your mom or your siblings. What did you share with them about what you were looking for, and did they have any counsel, or what was their experience once they saw you at Portland?
My dad was pretty helpful in the whole process because he had been through some form of that before, and so um, he he went with me to my visit to the University of Portland, and I could kind of tell that he liked the feel of it and liked that it was such a strong soccer culture. But overall, my parents were really supportive and they wanted me to make my own decision. So I definitely didn't feel any pressure either way. And yeah, my siblings were all super athletic, all chose to play basketball. I'm one of 6 kids, so my 5 siblings all chose to play basketball, and I was the lone soccer player.
Hmm.
But they were equally as supportive and just excited that I was gonna get to go play in college, so.
Did they go to a lot of your games there and, get to see you in that arena with, at Merlo Field, surrounded by all the fans?
So I think I don't think my brother Brendan never got to see me play collegiately because he was playing, I think he was in his last year playing Division 1 basketball at Davidson when I started my freshman year of college, and then he went overseas to play professionally in Europe.
Mhm.
So he was busy doing his thing. So he never got to see me play collegiately, but he ended up seeing me play professionally. And the rest of my siblings all made it out to at least one game. So they all got to experience the awesome um, Merlot field and all the fans, and got to experience what it was like to be at a real soccer specific stadium that was packed with fans. So it was fun.
Cool. Now, when you come out of Portland, and your teams did very well there, but, WPS is, still going. WUSA's in the rearview mirror at that point. You're a Rookie of the Year finalist in Boston and a prospect for 2012 Olympic team. Um, Tell us about that time, the early part of your, or the latter part of your college career and the early part of your, pro days.
Yeah. So my best friend Ellie Reed and I went to the University of Portland. That's where we met, and we both had aspirations very early on to play professionally. However, WUSA was, I can't remember what year it folded, but I do remember that it did fold, and there was a number of years while we were playing collegiately, where we didn't know if we'd be able to play collegiately in the United States because we didn't know there would even be a league.
Mhm.
So, anyways, all of which is to say that we had aspirations to play professionally after college. We didn't know what that was going to look like,
Yeah.
but we talked with our coach, and he helped kind of put us on a fast track to graduation. So we decided we would try to graduate in 3.5 years so that we'd be able to go play wherever we wanted to go play.
Mhm.
Come that spring of 2011. And so I'm really glad that we did that because the WPS started up, and the season started, I believe, in March. So a lot of players for their rookie season were trying to finish their last semester of school or took their last semester off of school without graduating in the hopes of going back at some point to get their degree.
Yeah.
But Ellie and I got to graduate in December of 2010, um, with our degrees, and then just focus on um, the next step, which was going to play professionally. So that's what that looked like for me. But yeah, that first season in the WPS was so fun, for a lot of reasons. It was a mixture of being young and confident, but also I got to play in a really awesome sports town, being Boston,
Yeah.
for my old coach, Tony DeChico. He
Yeah.
coached me in the 2008 Under 20 Women's World Cup, and so I knew him quite well at that point, and had a ton of respect for him. So I was over the moon when he drafted me in that first round of the WPS draft that year. So
How did, WPS compare to, what we know of NWSL now? I mean, did the atmosphere, how they take care of players, or I guess it's franchise by franchise, but
yeah, that really varied franchise by franchise. I would say in terms of level of play, it was very similar. Um, there were a lot of international players and good ones at that. And so the level of play I didn't think really differed all that much, but um, it felt like there was certainly a pretty big discrepancy between the way clubs were run. So, um, trying to think of a good example. There were some teams that were put up in really nice accommodations, and then other teams that were put in uh, substandard apartment housing. So there was just a wide range of the ways that the ownership groups or people decided to run their teams, and so
Mm.
I would say the NWSL has done a better job of try to uh, even the playing field, so to speak, or at least create standards.
Yeah.
So I know there's still room for growth, but um, yeah, there was definitely some funny business.
So there's the gap year, and I read a book recently. It was more of a just a first person account of 2012, and with the WPS folding, and it's an Olympic year, and and W League is really, the last minute outlet for everyone to play, yourself included. So uh, that's what brings you to Seattle is 2012. I'm kind of
Yeah,
curious to how that all came about. Why Seattle? Because you're clear across the country if you were living in Boston.
yeah, yeah. So I got my first season in the WPS under my belt and had a really good season. So it put me on PS Suntaga's radar. And shortly after the season ended, I started getting called into national team camps
Mhm.
in preparation for the 2012 London Olympics.
Mhm.
And so then in it was like a few weeks before the WPS season was supposed to start up. I woke up to an email saying that the WPS had folded.
Mm.
And so it was just kind of like somebody ripped the rug out from under my feet. Just it was a just I just remember like my stomach dropped and just not being in a very good mood at all because suddenly I went from having some stability to not knowing what was going to be next, where I was going to go, how I was going to get a good environment to play in.
Yeah.
So that was pretty devastating. But yeah, luckily there were a few good options for me in terms of where to play. And at the time when I found out the WPS had folded, I was actually in Seattle because my girlfriend, who's now my wife, is from the Bothell area, and so I was in Seattle for the off season. I was training with boys teams and other pro players around the area.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, so the W League decided that they were gonna kind of kick into high gear, and the Sounders really stepped up and decided they were gonna try to assemble a really competitive team. And so when I found out about it, I was all over it. I knew that I think there was 5 national team players, I believe, playing on that team at the time, and
Yeah.
so it was a really good training environment. Some of the teams that we played didn't have as competitive as a team, but the just being able to train day in and day out with the caliber of players that I needed to be playing with
Mhm.
in order to stay competitive with the national team was huge. So I was very grateful when the Sounders opportunity came my way.
Well, it was cool to see you in green, our shade of green anyway. I'm sure some of your friends in Portland probably repelled at it, but so that was your welcome. So uh, they were not paying players. I think you were still on a U.S. soccer stipend or whatever they call that. Is that correct?
So there was contracts at the time. I think there was only 24 contracts with the national team during that time, and I don't think I earned a contract until later that year. So um I was one of the national team players that was in the pool that
Yeah,
was not under contract. So I was making ends meet by coaching and doing individual training and small group sessions,
yeah.
just trying to eke out some sort of living. But that was my story and the story of a lot of other professional players who weren't lucky enough to nab one of the contracts with the national team.
Well, I was gonna say, I think I've read that Megan Rapinoe, even she was probably on a payroll with US Soccer at the time, but I think she was, sleeping on the floor or couch at, Stephanie Cox's house, so, uh,
Yeah, that is accurate.
the things you
Yep.
have to do, right?
Yep, and I was staying with my girlfriend's parents. Um, which as a recent college grad and someone who likes to think of themselves as being independent was um and I had to swallow my pride a little bit, but I really get along with my in-laws and that worked out well for me.
Well, that's cool, and then I don't know how much, how many of these people had, the players, you talked about the 5 internationals, that were with Sounders women, but, and I don't know if you joined, it seemed like the team came together in terms of the, marquee status quite quickly. Um, so, what there was quite a buzz about that team, and in the W League at least, probably never to be replicated. What could you sense from the inside about that team and players going in and out of training camps? Probably like yourself, it was not your typical W League season or team. So I'm just kind of curious what you remember about that. What strikes you?
Yeah, it was a interesting environment because he had the 5 players who were in and out with the national team, so, um and then the other players who were there for the whole season, so I can imagine for them that that was certainly a challenge in having us come in and out, and I think everybody was very understanding that there was it was an Olympic year, so it was an important period of time for the national team to be getting together. But um, I can imagine that for a lot of the players on the team, that just having us kind of come and go was probably challenging because I know there were some games where we weren't around to play, and so the the rest of the Sounders players kind of had to step up and try to win games without the 5 national team players, which everybody did an awesome job. So but in terms of the training environment, um, Frenchie was our coach, she's an outstanding coach, and she's got national team experience herself, and now she's down at the University of Portland coaching down there. But it was I just remember it just being a ton of fun. The environment that we were playing in, just really competitive and everybody pushing each other and having that fighting spirit. So it was a good time.
And if it had not been, uh, for the interest that the community took in Sounders women that summer, I as a Seattleite, I don't think there would have been the, momentum to go into then the following, fall and winter when NWSL was created and Reign gets one of the or Seattle gets one of the charter teams. So
Yeah.
and it was a launching pad for the sport because the team was strong for the Olympics. Obviously, they won the gold. Um, that experience, I mean, did it feel like home by the time that you were looking the following fall at the prospect of rejoining the pros? Did this seem like a natural market?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're right in that the Sounders, that team, that W League team helped create some momentum for Seattle to have a women's professional team. And so, in terms of did it feel like home to me, I absolutely wanted to be somewhere in the Northwest. And Seattle was my number one um, place I wanted to end up. Now, at the time, though, so later that year, I ended up earning a contract with the national team, and which meant that I was going to be allocated. So when the NWSL started up and they started allocating national team players, I ended up being allocated to Chicago,
Mhm.
and I was all prepared and ready to go, but, yeah, I was trying my best to make phone calls and try to figure out a way to finagle a deal where I could end up in Seattle, which
Mhm.
is definitely where my heart was, and I mean, I just my heart is definitely in the Pacific Northwest. I am one of the few that has um I can't say that I'm able to choose between Portland or Seattle because I've got one foot in the University of Portland and one foot with Seattle Rain. So, um, but yeah, I was thrilled when that deal came through. I remember I was driving I was driving back to I think I was driving back to Seattle. I was driving through Hood River and I was expecting a phone call at any minute to tell me if
Mhm.
the deal was going to go through. And I lost service and I was all anxious. And I finally got back into service and I had a voicemail. So I pulled over like off the highway and got on the phone and found out that the deal went through and I was going to be, Seattle was going to be my home. So I was thrilled about it.
So you never even put on a Chicago shirt, right?
Mm-mm.
It
Nope.
it Well, I'll come back to that, but I also wanna address this. So, yeah, you've played in Portland and Seattle. Uh, our fan bases might hate to admit it, but I think they do have a common respect for one another, a passion for the game. Um, Tell me what they've got in common, what you see from your vantage point in the center circle, looking out at the stands. What's common about the 2 fan bases? Or what's totally different? Or
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously the similarities are pretty apparent in that both Seattle and Portland are big time soccer cities. I mean, you look at the Timbers and the Sounders men, and they draw massive crowds year in and year out. Um, and so the interesting difference for me is in terms of the support for the women's side. So the Thorns sell out I don't know what percentage of their games, but a good percentage of their games. And yet the Reign somehow have struggled to get that same fan base. And I cannot for the life of me figure that one out. Because playing at the University of Portland with the Pilots, we had massive support. And so um, as a college team, but I'm wondering if it has something to do with Seattle being they've got a football team, they're trying to get the NBA back, they're going to get the NHL here. Whereas Portland is a little bit of a smaller sports city. They've
Mhm.
just got their NBA team. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, but I do find it interesting that much to my chagrin that the Thorns are able to get more fans
Well, they're
than
they're
we
an
did.
outlier. I mean, there's no other club like them when it comes right down to it. But, yes,
Yeah,
to be within, what, 200 miles and have that disparity is, a head shaker.
yeah,
So that winter before you, uh, come to, be allocated, were you that was your winter in Germany, correct?
yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So Potsdam, tell us about that experience. Had you been to Europe much?
I
Or
had,
is it Potsdam, right?
yeah, Potsdam. So yeah, I didn't make the 2012 Olympic roster with the national team, and so I was talking with Pia and some of the other coaches, asking them what I needed to do to give me the best shot in making the next round.
Mhm.
Um, and they all said go play in Europe. So I was willing
Is that because there
to.
wasn't a league yet, or why did they say that?
Yeah, that's because there was no professional league in the United States at that time. And they
Oh,
said that if you want to play at the highest level and just get a different flavor of the game to add to your repertoire, you should go play in Europe. And um, so that I was willing to make that sacrifice and leave the United States and leave my comfort zone,
mm,
in order to give myself the best shot at making the next Olympic roster and World Cup roster. And so the opportunity came up, for me to play at Turbine Potsdam in Germany in the Frauen Bundesliga. And um, to be honest, that was not a great experience for me.
okay.
um, I ended up being severely overtrained, and I had multiple overuse injuries, and
Uh-huh.
I I was a little bit homesick, but most of it had to do with the overtraining, and I was trying to play injured, and so uh I started to just kind of fall out of love with the game, and I grew kind of bitter that I felt kind of stuck. And so I was working my tail off trying to get better, but playing injured is never fun. And I felt like I didn't have a way out. And so I ended up playing there for I signed a 1+1. So a year long contract guarantee, and then the plus one being, I think it was the team and player option. But I ended up leaving at the halfway point through that season to come home. And that was right around the time that they announced the NWSL was going to
See.
be around that year. So it ended up working out for me, in terms of coming home and knowing I was going to have a place to play in the NWSL. But at that point, I came home and I was kind of a broken player. I
Hmm.
think psychologically, I had a lot going on. I ended up working with a sports psychologist that helped out a lot and rehabbing my overuse injuries. But it took if anybody who has ever had overuse injuries, overtraining, you know that it takes a long time to overtrain your body. And once you get injured with overuse injuries, it takes a long time to let your body repair itself from that. So it took a couple months, of kind of letting my body rest because I had been going nonstop, for a long time at that point. So that was a lesson learned for sure.
Well, it doesn't sound like there's a lot you can do about it because you can't like ask out of training or something like that. So it's got to be a tough spot. It really does. Uh,
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because I think nowadays there are a lot of players who are able to kind of manage their training and have an open line of communication with their coaches in terms of how they're feeling, their energy levels, their body, and the coaches can kind of tailor practices towards what a player needs.
yeah.
Um, but certainly in Germany, that was not an option. But yeah, so at the time, I was just in a tough spot. I felt like I um, just couldn't win, and I just was trying to play injured, and it was no fun. But it was a valuable experience. I'll put it that way.
Well, I bet you would put that over to the side and say, I hope that's as bad as it gets.
For sure.
So when you're driving through Hood River uh, and everything lines up and you're probably at that point you're giving your body a rest anyway. Um, but you must have been the first of Laura Harvey's trades. So, so I mean, I know she really clicked into gear over the following 2013, but uh, it's chaotic, I would guess, that first season. You've got A Rod is expecting, so she's one of the allocated players. Hope's recovering from some kind of surgery, I think wrist surgery or shoulder.
Hmm.
Um, but you're paired with Jess Fishlock, and could you tell things were going to get better, or did you have some question marks?
There were a lot of question marks. I think we started off the season like 0-12 or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was not a good look. And so, uh, as a player who had been like pretty much most of my life, I've played for winning teams. And so it was the first time ever that I played for or on a losing team.
Yeah.
And that was rough. There were some intense practices where we were at each other's throats, and we were trying to work things out, and we just kept losing and kept losing. But one of the things that I remember most in all of in all the seasons that I played with the Rain was our first win that year in Boston, and how just we were so excited. I think we celebrated after that game like we had just won the freaking World Cup. We were so excited. So, yeah, there were definitely a lot of question marks. Jess Fishlock and I were in the midfield, but we were still trying to figure each other out, and so it wasn't like we ended up like, when I retired, we had an awesome playing relationship, and I mean, we just played off each other so well, but it certainly didn't start that way. There was a lot of us yelling at each other and trying to figure out our styles of play, and when she wanted the ball, where she wanted the ball, and vice versa. So um it was a growing season, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that photo we just looked at was the final, I think, in 2014, even though it's at Starfire. But I, because if it had been that team probably on the field for a steady pace in 2013, it would have been a lot more settled. Uh, was it the same field in Boston that you had played on a few years earlier? I'm not sure if they used the same facility.
No, so it was a different field. I don't even know where that field was, but the WPS we played in at Harvard Stadium. But when the NWSL started, they had moved off of the Harvard campus and were playing somewhere else.
Okay. Laura, you've dropped some names that you've really played for some outstanding coaches, Tony DeChico, Michelle French. Then, so tell us about Laura Harvey,
Hmm.
um, uh, because she's not like Michelle. She's not like Tony. She's not American based. What'd she ask of you and the others around you, and your roles and tactically? And so, what did you experience? Not just 2013, but throughout your run with her.
Yeah, Laura. So I mentioned earlier that I was kind of at a point in my career where psychologically I was just kind of not at in my top form, and physically I was still recovering from overuse injuries, and so I was pretty nervous going into that season, knowing that I didn't feel like I was at the top of my game.
Mhm.
But Laura was amazing. I still think to this day that she's the best coach that I ever played for. Um, she just, I think the way she treated every player individually, and just kind of treated them as human beings felt different to me than the way I had previously played for coaches.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to describe it, but if you know Laura, um, I think people understand what I'm saying. Um, and then in terms of like playing style, and what she asked of us, um, I think her vision really started to take shape in 2014, with the addition of a couple of key players, Kim Little, namely. Um, this Scottish breakout who, um, I mean, unbelievable. I think she's um, one of the best number 10s in the world. And certainly at that time, I think she was the best in the world.
Yeah.
But it was, I think, playing the style that we were playing with the opposite movements and the 4-3-3, and I think we were playing a really exciting style of soccer. It was possession based, but it was fast, and I think we counterattacked with good speed, and um, that was really, uh, I think, 2014 is really when it started to take shape. And then that season and the next, we ended up making it to the finals, 2 years in a row.
Mhm.
Um, Now, unfortunately, we lost both years, but um, that's that's soccer for you.
Well, we think of you as the best team all around those two years, certainly. I mean,
Yeah,
same would go for the Sounders when they won their Supporter Shield. I mean, that's over time, and a cup final is a snapshot in time in a lot of ways. So you've been you were a captain in college. You were a captain on the U20s, right? You got to
that's
lift the
correct.
trophy first, I believe. Uh,
Yep,
and then I don't believe you started as the captain for Rain, but you ended up being the captain wearing the armband. What you know, what do you think in your personality uh, lends itself to being an effective captain? And because I don't think you go and run for the office of captain. It's bestowed upon you. So I'm kind of curious what you think.
yeah. I think a big part of it, and I talked with Laura a little bit about this, because we would have conversations on why she wanted me to be the captain. And she used to say that I was the bridge. Um, so I feel like growing up in the family I grew up in, with a big family of six, I was the middle child. I was beat up on, but I also got to beat up. So I think and not only that, but we moved around a lot. So I moved 5 different times growing up. So I knew what it was like to be the new kid. Um, and there's I knew how to make a friend. My mom always used to say that you have to be a friend to make a friend. And it sounds corny, but I do believe that making friends is a skill, and that's a skill that I had to develop over and over again. Every couple of years we would move.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I think those my upbringing kind of lended itself towards that captain role. It's definitely not something that I set out to do year after year. It just kind of happened. I know that I always went out of my way to make people feel welcome, the new players on the team. And if there was somebody who I felt like was kind of off to the side or being quiet, I would try to bring them in, and not only on the field, but off the field as well. And that's like 3/4 of the battle, is just trying to get people to mesh and respect each other. And so, um, I think all of that kind of lends itself towards the roles and the traits of what makes a good captain, and that ended up just being my role from most of my life, to be honest. But definitely starting in college and then moving into the pros.
Does does your the feeling of freedom to be yourself change when the armband goes on or goes off? I mean, were you the same person whether you had it on or not? Or
I
do you
think
just have
that might be a good question for my teammates, but I felt like I was the same person all the
okay,
time, no matter if I had the armband on or off.
okay,
So
all right.
I
Okay,
think I think that consistency too is crucial for a captain. You
yeah,
can't you can't throw on a hat, put on your captain's hat when you have your armband on, and then take it off when you have your armband off. It's kind of a full-time, call it a job, but it really shouldn't be a job. It should just be inherent in somebody's trait, and personalities. And for me, I think it was, and it is still.
cool, cool. Um, so the it's a NWSL is a half year proposition, and you go to Australia. Totally different than probably Potsdam. Totally different from the United States. But you met up either as on the same team or competing against some of your Rain teammates. Just tell us, and I think I've read that was your honeymoon as well. So tell us about West Sydney Wanderers experience.
Yeah, so after I think it was the 2014 season, I had spent the previous off season in Seattle playing with boys teams and different training groups, trying to keep my level of fitness and stay sharp and get better. And I felt like I had finally gotten to a point where I was ready to play year round again. And so I wanted to play in another professional league, and the W League in Australia lends itself well to the NWSL because they have the opposite season. So I basically got to have an endless summer for 2 years, which was pretty awesome because I got to play in Australia in 2000, the 2014-15 season, and then the 2015-16 season. So
Yeah.
um, it was, I had a really good time. I love Australia. I tried to convince my wife to live there. It didn't work out, but we talk about going back to visit all the time, and here we are. That was just a picture of my Rain teammates that we were just playing with and against. So Carmelita Moscato in the other red and black jersey. She was a Canadian national team player who
Yeah.
played on the Rain, and then Jess Fishlock and Kim Little there playing for Melbourne. But yeah, it was so fun playing in Australia, and they also had, it was a pretty competitive league, and get some international team or international players coming in. There's a couple or international spots per team, so it was pretty darn competitive to land a spot on a team in Australia because there was only, I think they only had 3 spots that could be taken up by international players. And so you can imagine that playing in Australia would be sought after, and it was. So, but yeah, whenever we got to go play in a different city, and if we knew either teammates or former teammates, we would all try and get together at some point. And most of the time that was after the game because obviously trying to win the game. But yeah, it was a blast.
You talked about an endless summer, and you had been coming off, a few years, a couple of years before the strain on your body. Did you hold up pretty well to playing year round? Were there still some gaps where you could take a rest?
Yeah, so and the nice thing I think at the time, and I'm sure it's changed a little bit since then, but the W League in Australia, the team I played for, we trained three 3 or 4 days a week, typically 3, and then we'd have a game on the weekends. So there were numerous days off every week.
Oh,
Um, Now, not to say that I took every day off, because oftentimes I'd go out and do my own training and just work on a different skill set. But it was a very nice balance for me to feel like I had a game to go play in, an environment to train in, but still have a little bit of much needed rest.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
good to hear. Um, so the national team, uh, I, at least the people I watch games with or talk about the game with, I think there's an appreciation in these parts for holding mids, the people that play the tough roles, sometimes not the most glamorous roles, uh, and that's why I think Ozzy Alonso. I think it's why you developed a loyal following. So it seems like the national team could have used, I mean, you can't argue with success, but they could have always used a player with your toolbox. Um, was that frustrating for you that you didn't uh, get that opportunity?
Yeah, it absolutely was. I mean, it was heartbreaking. That's something that I wanted and strove for and worked my rear end off for my entire playing career. So um, I felt like I was good enough, but at the end of the day, it's not up to me. You got to have a coach in there who also believes that, and you also have to prove it. So um, I was certainly disappointed when I felt like I wasn't. I don't know if I wasn't given a shot because you could argue that I was given a shot. Just being called into national team camps. But I felt like my performance in the NWSL warranted more of a look than I believe that I got. But um, I think that's part of the struggle with being a professional athlete. And I think one of the lessons I learned is that my mom used to tell us this all the time was that life's not fair.
Yeah.
And I hated to hear it, and I still hate to hear it because when you think you've earned something or you're good enough to get that promotion or that job or that spot on the team, it can be pretty devastating when you don't get it. But um, it's that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
You sound like a mother in the making, and I don't know if that saying's gonna get out there, but you've got it at the ready, I suppose. So yeah,
Yeah.
life isn't fair. So 2016, take us through that. You're coming off two incredible years with the Rain. Um, I don't know if you when you arrived at the thought that this would be it. This was going to be your final year. You're still starting. You're playing every match. Your second team all league, I think, the year before. You're just what 27, 28. Take us through that final year. Your thought process, how you approached the game that season.
Yeah. So I played professionally for 6 years. And after that first season in Boston, I mentioned that it was a ton of fun. Um, but what I didn't mention was that there was another side of me that felt like a little bit empty, just like it was I was having so much fun and soccer was really fulfilling for me, but I knew that it wouldn't be forever, and I felt like kind of stagnant in this whole other area of my life where I wasn't getting better at something because I knew that I was getting better at soccer, but I wasn't using my mind in any other way, and
Uh,
I felt I guess stagnant in that area. So I knew soccer wasn't gonna be around forever. I knew I wasn't gonna be able to play for the rest of my life. So I decided that I would try to figure out what was gonna be next for me in my spare time
uh-huh.
when I wasn't training and doing soccer things. So yeah, I spent 6 years trying to figure out what was gonna be next for me, and it took me 5 years to realize that firefighting was it. Um, I ended up having a conversation with a family friend. He was a former firefighter in Seattle,
Mhm.
And he and his wife were actually on a trip out in Australia when I was playing professionally over there, and I met them for lunch, and we talked about firefighting and the fire service and what it's all about, and it just checked off everything I wanted in a job. You're on a team, it's challenging, it's physical, you're not in an office. Every call is a little bit different. There's multiple routes you can go. You can become a paramedic, you can promote. There's wildland firefighting, there's all these specialties you can go into. So it was just a really exciting conversation to have because I felt like a light bulb went off
Uh,
finally. And so I think the other thing that plays into this is that your last question, we talked about the the national team and being pretty disappointed that I didn't end up making a World Cup or Olympic roster, and being upset about that. But I knew that I didn't want to be the 30 something year old who is making less than a teacher's salary and only being able to play 6 months a year
yeah.
in the United States. So I just, and for some people, that's what they want. And it's because there are a lot of wonderful things about playing professionally, regardless of the instability.
Yeah.
But for me, it just started, the instability of it all just started to wear on me. Uh, my wife and I got married, and we were talking about eventually starting a family. And I knew that I wasn't making enough money to support a child. I was barely able to support myself. Um, so there's just, I feel like life just started to come into play a little bit, like
Yeah.
real life. And I wasn't feeling as fulfilled with soccer as I was in the years prior. So while I was still starting every game, I felt like I was at my peak or darn near it. But I knew I wasn't going to get a shot with the national team with the coach that they had in there at the time, um, which was unfortunate. But I knew I didn't want to spend the next, you know, 10 years of my life doing what I had been doing because it started to just kind of wear on me. So
Uh,
that's when I started to test for the fire service.
yeah.
And um, honestly, so with the fire service, it's really competitive to get into. And everybody I talked to told me that it takes on average anywhere from 2 to 5 years to get hired. And
Oh,
so I started testing um, the for the fire service, I think at the beginning of 2016, thinking that I would have at least two more seasons to
oh,
play
okay.
and just like hone my testing skills and interview, yada yada yada. But it all went so fast. I ended up getting hired in 6 months' time, and so um, that happened a lot faster than I anticipated it would, which
Okay.
at the time was it was a hard decision for me because I knew that if I decided to retire, that I more than likely wouldn't play soccer again.
Yeah.
Um, you hear people retiring and making a comeback, but I also know how hard that is, and so and I didn't want to give up my career in firefighting to come back and play soccer. I just kind of wanted to make a clean transition, and I was lucky enough to get an offer from the Kirkland Fire Department, and the timing was right in terms of the academy start date being after the NWSL season. Um, and so that's kind of how it happened. But
So that offer, when does that offer come to be in relation to the season? Is it pretty close to when you said, "This is it"?
Yeah, yeah, and I had talked with Laura about what was going on and how I was looking into the fire service, and initially I told her, I was like, "Listen, it's just something I'm interested in, and it's probably going to take a couple of years to get to the point where I'm ready to retire. But then everything just got put on the fast track when I started getting offers from fire departments,
Uh,
conditional offers, and so it was a good problem to have,
yeah.
but it was also a very difficult decision because I thought I was going to get to play for a few more years. So, but with that said, I am very grateful for my job and my profession. I'm very happy in what I'm doing now. I do miss soccer. I will say that, but
Well, I mean, how many people I know, yeah, you go out, I think your last home game, you score, and you're not a scorer, so, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
there's a little bow on all of this, isn't there?
yeah. That was in terms of memories from my career. Um, there's a lot of good ones, but that is definitely in the um, top few memories of my career. I playing my last home game at Memorial Stadium under Laura, and I ended up scoring. And I can still like go back to that moment, but I watched the ball go into the back of the net, and all I thought about was turning around and sprinting over to Laura and just giving her a big hug, and the whole team just was chasing after me, and it's like a mosh pit when we finally collided. But yeah, it was a special moment for sure.
Um, do you stay, this has gotta be a challenging career, and you're starting you've started a family in the midst of it, um, the, is there a clear break? Do you stay in touch with, I realize there's turnover in the team, Laura's not there and a lot of the players have gone, but do you stay in contact? I mean, Jess is still there,
Yeah, I try my best to. So this past season has been a little bit of a weird one, just with um,
I think they
COVID
only
and
text themselves. I think that's how they.
yeah. So yeah, I was still trying to go to a game here and there now that when they moved down to the Tacoma area, and I still talk with a handful of players that are still playing. Steph Cox is a good friend of mine, and um, admittedly, I'm not a very much of a not a phone talker, but every time we get together with a group of people that I used to play with, it kind of just falls right back to where it used to be. So that always feels really good.
What do you see yourself doing? I mean, I could see you maybe in a couple years saying, "Boy, it would be really fun to just see if I could play a couple more games." I don't know what if the rain will, invite you, but what do you see yourself? The job is physically demanding, but what do you see yourself doing as a lifetime activity or sport? And could you ever see yourself back on the field?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just kind of curious what you foresee.
Gosh, I have been so tempted to try to come back and play in some fashion, but I mean, to try to come back, I mean, that's itself a full-time job to try and come back and get to the level where you're able to play at the professional level. And not to mention, I live over in Ellensburg now, so that'd be quite the commute from Ellensburg to Tacoma. So that presents a problem. But in terms of other activities, I think that's one of my favorite things about not having soccer in my life in the way that it was before, is that I'm able to do all the things that I felt like I was missing out on.
Mhm.
So mountain biking, hiking, skiing, water sports, backpacking. It still feels really good right now to not have such a strict schedule where I can just do what I want to do when I want to do it. Um, I've thought about doing a Xterra triathlon eventually, which is open water swim, a mountain bike, and then a trail run.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I'll do that eventually. But when it came down to signing up a year ago, I think I was going to do one. the thought of having a 16-week 2-a-day program just didn't sit well with me because I felt like I had that for, a decade of my life with soccer, and so I wasn't quite ready to jump into that realm of, um, I guess, endurance sports, but eventually I'll get there. That's on my list of things to do, but yeah, I've got plenty of fun things to do that don't involve soccer, but I still manage to stay active and fit.
Last question. I live within a block of a fire station and in Seattle, and I know they have their fair share of fans. And obviously you cultivated your own fans while you're playing. Uh, are you recognized, or are you Keelin the firefighter, or where do you think you're at in that? I mean, your admirers, are they outnumbered now by the people in Kirkland than your soccer fans?
Every once in a while, I'll get somebody that recognizes me. Um, Not too long ago, we went on a call. A gal, she had fallen down some stairs and broke her ankle, and we were transporting her to the hospital. And I called the hospital to give them the short report, and I said, "Hi, this is Keelan with Aid 122." And as soon as I said my name, my patient who was sitting next to me goes, and I look over, I get off the phone, I look at her, and I was like, "What was that about?" And she was like, "I knew it. You're Keelan Winters." She was like, "I was at your last game where you scored that goal." And
Oh,
so that was pretty fun for me. But it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while it does. My crew likes to give me a hard time about it if they witness it. But overall, I'm just Keelan the firefighter, which is fine by me.
that's cool. Well, I just want to thank you for sharing your story today. Your commitment on the field, now to your community, just uh, really happy to see you and Paige and your family. So happy, and I'm glad you're still here in the greater Washington soccer community. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Of course, it's been fun. Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks to our producer, Leanne Johnson. Thanks to all of you for watching our Conversations with a Legend series. For more on the history of Washington State soccer and to learn more about Washington State Legends of Soccer, go to wasoccerlegends.org. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.